Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for our first CANNAtalk of 2024. And once again, I'd like to quickly thank CANNA for organizing these events and being leaders in educating, supporting, and developing our industry. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. This is an interactive session, so we encourage our listeners to submit questions that we will take and ask as the session's ongoing. So please go ahead and ask questions at any point in time. Please note that you are on mute, obviously, except all our panelists. If you are watching this on the CANNA website, you can just go in the QA box right on the bottom of the screen, type in your question, and we will get the question. Otherwise, if you're watching it in full screen mode, you can use your mobile phone and scan the QR code in the top right corner. All right. So now that we have over 10 years in our legalized industry, let's kick it off with a discussion on the state of our industry today and looking at what's in 2024. So while we still have a number of challenges, including an oversupply, potentially complex regulation, depending on what markets we're going into, and often some financial constraints. So as the new markets are opening up, let's look at strategies, including tackling our current challenges and some potential solutions. So before we start, let me introduce our three panelists. We have Stephen Murphy. He is a co-founder and CEO of Prohibition Partners, a global leader in cannabis tech, data, and media, a seasoned entrepreneur who is also the co-founder of Psych Capital, UK's only publicly listed psychedelics company, and Life, one of the largest medical cannabis group in Europe. We have David Brown. He is a co-founder and author and advisor of StratCann Services. David has been working in and reporting on the evolution of the cannabis industry since 2012. He was a co-founder of Lift Cannabis and editor for Lift News. He spent 2 years as a senior policy advisor with Health Canada, legalization and regulatory branch, and founded StratCann Services in 2020 to help continue documenting and reporting on the industry. And finally, Matt Lemairs, international editor for MJBiz. MJBiz is the most trusted media brand serving the business side of the cannabis and hemp industries in the US, Canada, and globally. The attendees and readers are business people such as company founders, executive, technical specialists, and private equity leaders. For more information on our panelists, you can click on their bios through the CANNA website, and feel free to reach out to anyone. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of our conversation. I'll start with David. Your recent publication on the Canadian market, it showed an upward trend in cultivation, production, and pricing going into 2024. Very good news. What factors do you see that's contributing to this?
Yeah, thanks, Nico. I think, we're starting to reach some sort of equilibrium. There's producers are sitting on, I think, 1 million kilograms of cannabis. So there's still obviously a large oversupply, but that amount has not really been growing much beyond that level for a couple years now. I think we're also seeing a lot of readjustment within the industry in general. Frankly, there's been a lot of closures and will continue to be a lot of closures. And so this means that those producers who are able to get product to market look to be potentially getting a little bit more for their product than they were getting maybe a year ago.
Interesting. Very good. So the oversupply is not getting any bigger, which is a good thing. Hopefully, we can start moving this oversupply and get a better balance. But do you see this maybe an increase of export impacting also this? Because we hear more and more Canadians are trying to get into the export business.
I think it's obviously having an impact. I'm personally take the position that I think exports are often overstated. They certainly are a factor, but for the most part, we have publicly traded companies who have an incentive to really trumpet these exports to different markets, and I think long term that's not really going to change the math of the Canadian market all that much. I think it's kind of a short burst of interest, and as those markets start to reach their own equilibrium, it's going to kind of push back, and we're potentially already seeing that with Israel. So I think it is helping. I think there are across the market, there are slight improvements in price that are starting to benefit growers in a way, like I say, that it wasn't a year ago. You have, even some small producers starting to find some opportunity with export, and obviously prices are a little bit higher there. But overall, I think the market is hitting a point where we aren't seeing a continued increase in production. We're starting to see some slight decreases, but it tends to balance out. We're starting to, I think that we've potentially seen prices bottom out in the last 6 months or so. Don't really think they can go much lower anyway. So I think that's why we started to see a rebound. One of the articles you referenced was something I based on Canadian Cannabis Exchange's numbers. And so they track through their services a lot of those wholesale prices. And so they started to see some of those numbers coming up a little bit. And that probably accounts for some of that overall price increase that we saw in terms of production dollars that was recorded by StatsCann. But overall, it's I don't want to paint that rosy of a picture. It's still quite challenging in the market, and will continue to be quite challenging in the market. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later as well.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that you highlighted that each country there's emerging markets, but they're going to trend same as mature countries like Canada, and we've seen the trends happen. What happened in the U.S. happen in Canada years later. So really good to highlight that to not put all your eggs in baskets for exports. Hopefully, we do see the international cannabis supply chain develop a little bit more to give better access. But speaking about the U.S., Matt, I know you do live in Canada, but you do often report on what happens around the world. So for us Canucks up here, can you highlight what is actually happening in the U.S. regarding regulations, and what are your thoughts on the legalization? Will there be any changes that's going to impact us in 2024 or anytime soon?
Sure, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I thought David Brown's comments were, I totally agree with them, because the export market is usually a little bit exaggerated by publicly traded companies. So I think the number I saw was about $170 million of exports, which isn't like irrelevant. It's still meaningful numbers, right? But it's not as big as Canada's medical market, for example, the domestic market. So you have to kind of keep it in perspective, I guess. So in the U.S., it's not legalization, but it is the most consequential reform that has happened in the industry in the United States in decades, maybe ever. What's happening is rescheduling. So cannabis is currently Schedule 1 with heroin and meth and stuff like that. Drugs where there's no currently accepted medical use, at least as far as the American government is concerned. And they're going to move it to Schedule 3, which is drugs with a moderate to low potential for dependence, like Tylenol with codeine. It'll be in that category. So it's important to understand what this doesn't mean too, because we get this quite often, these questions. So it won't allow for American companies to export or import medical cannabis, because to export or import medical cannabis, you can only do that between two countries with federal laws and federal regulations that allow for that activity. And simply moving it to Schedule 3 won't allow for that. But it is a step towards potentially allowing for that. But there's still going to be a lot of work to do. One effect will be to reduce the federal taxes American cannabis companies have to pay. But I think this is a little bit overblown, because eventually the U.S. is going to have a federally regulated system. And at which point you're probably going to see some federal taxes imposed, which will probably be at least as high as the taxes they're paying right now. There aren't very many places in the world where medical cannabis is allowed legally and regulated federally, where there aren't additional federal or national taxes applied. So I don't think this is going to be, it's not going to be a huge game changer in terms of saving money on tax that a lot of publicly traded American companies are saying it will be, maybe in the short term. But yeah, nonetheless, when rescheduling becomes law, every regulated marijuana business in the United States will enjoy a tax cut. So that, how long that lasts for, I mean, who knows? Maybe it depends on who wins the next election. 280E prohibits American cannabis companies from taking typical business deductions on their federal tax returns. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about saving tax money. So it's a huge step, the biggest step in decades or maybe ever in the United States. But in terms of your question of its impact on Canada, I don't really see much of an impact on Canada because it's not like American exporters will be competing against Canadian exporters for the $170 million prize.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And so I guess we need to keep our pulse on what's happening. And with the election, there is a quick question: how much do you think the U.S. election will impact any meaningful changes in this regulation? Just quickly, do you think any of the candidates, the two big candidates, have anything to do with any major changes coming?
I don't. I mean, I don't. I have no idea. Right? You have like Biden against Trump, and who knows what Trump is going to do. I don't think he's going to be more pro-cannabis than Biden will. So I think from the cannabis industry's perspective, it's Biden or bust.
Yeah. Okay. But there's still no clear politician that's really behind this, like Trudeau was back in our days, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So let's keep going around the world a little bit. Hi, Stephen. Since you're based in the UK, let's start there. Can you highlight what is happening there in the UK? Regulation, market potential, opportunities.
Yeah. Again, thank you for the introduction and certainly the welcome. So the UK, look, Europe. Europe is a fascinating market, and it's growing. Like this, the rate of progress within the cannabis space. A lot of people argue it's going too slow, and in fact, if you look at a holistic picture, it's actually going at a rapid rate, considering all the moving parts that need to function to in order to provide access. So Europe, when we kind of first started just covering the space back in 2016, 17, there was legal federal markets around the world. Today we're etching up near the 90 mark. Of that, the majority or a vast majority are in Europe, and Europe has kind of been going through a seismic shift in terms of its positioning towards cannabis. Now, it's not an economic position, but is more of a social health initiative that's kind of just driving the change. So, the UK being one of the closest trading partners, certainly with Canada, has since 2018 has slowly been evolving its access program to medical cannabis. Now, it's done so in a system that is both progressive in terms of how it allows for new entrants and how it allows for new operators and new products, and within existing licensing legislation. It is restrictive in terms of how access is provided. So, in a lot of legal markets, medical cannabis can be prescribed by a common doctor, whereas in the UK, of course, there is a restriction with only specialists allowed to prescribe. So there is that added layer of complexity and cost because, of course, in the UK it remains private and privately funded, and so it again, the cost and the challenge of certainly getting to a specialist adds to the complexity and difficulty of getting a prescription. So you have you have it as a private market, you have it as a kind of hard to reach market, and you have very little public, certainly public support around it. So the NICE, the as in the National Institute of Care Excellency, who essentially um, provide governance and education and recommendation on kind of for doctors and the NHS on what to prescribe and kind of what they should recommend, has so far has declined to endorse cannabis as a medicine. What that, or medical cannabis or as a medicine, what that has left, that has left cannabis outside of the NHS, which limits, of course, the channels in terms of where it can be distributed, and certainly where doctors can learn about it, which is even, as we know, in every emerging market, more important. But what you do have is, like, you have a market that is private, that is still growing. Like this year, last year, kind of the figures are around, anywhere between 20 to 30,000 patients, because it's private and it's scattered. The specifics are, are questionable, but you've got this year, the target, they're looking at around anywhere between 35 to 40% growth in the market to get to around 50,000 patients. So that will, ultimately see quite a significant and healthy private market, where that is served primarily by private operators. You do have a lot of new entrant or early entrants from Canada and the US, Curaleaf, of course, being one of the largest, to take a position there a few years ago, who've used the UK as an access point into Europe and a launchpad into Europe, because the regulations are fairly clear cut, because there is an established private market, because there is a modus operandi in terms of how you can do business within the sector. This compare that to markets like Italy or Poland, where it's not an open market per se in terms of private businesses or businesses wanting to enter. So you have the UK is, the negative is that it remains private, but I suppose the positive is it's very open to the cannabis business industry.
And just quickly follow up there, Stephen. Question from our listeners. Are we hearing that the UK is stalling some trade discussions with Canada? And is there a risk that the UK and potentially other countries like Germany or Australia will follow the Israel anti-dumping that we're hearing? I kind of heard some whispers in Australia as well. Just quickly on that one.
No, I don't see, like, the protectionism element. It's, for that to actually exist, it almost needs to be initiated from the start. Like, I think, look, how much longer Canada can remain impertinent to imports is going to be a bigger question, because why would a company like, a Colombian flower is 2 cents, 3 cents, you're at that level. So why should that Canada's got bigger questions to answer for, not worrying so much about import. Well, that's about export, how we can grow export, but how do we survive import? Because there is more product being grown outside of Canada, or there will be more product being grown outside of Canada in the next 5 years than inside, and that is, that's a major challenge for all markets as the global supply chain develops.
Correct.
There isn't a level of protectionism. One, I suppose that's within, obviously the UK isn't in the EU anymore, silly fools, but they, within the trade agreement, protectionism isn't something that can be established. So you won't have that necessarily. And regarding kind of governance and guidance, the UK isn't out of the EU in that regard. There is still very close collaboration. Now,
Excellent.
so I don't see there being. I think kind of look what happens in the likes of Israel or even Australia is local producers kind of throwing their toys out of the pram. The local government needing to demonstrate that they're doing something and making a little bit of noise. Well, in fact, there will be, I would say, little chance of a blockade or blockage happening. There may potentially be quotas, but we're a long time away from that.
Well, that's good to hear. So really, technically, seeing more of an open market that effectively will affect the Canadians more on their production costs and being able to compete with the international market once everything opens up. Matt, so we talked about the UK, we talked about the US and Canada, obviously. What other exciting markets are you looking at outside of Canada that could be exciting for some of our listeners?
Thank you. There's big news in Spain this week. Spain is consulting the public on broader access rules for their medical cannabis system. Until now, you could only get medical cannabis for epilepsy and multiple sclerosis and stuff like that. But the new rules are going to open it up to cancer patients and some other patients. It's not nearly going to be the access market that you're looking at in North America, but it's still going to be a much bigger market than what exists right now. So dispensing is going to happen in hospitals and maybe in regular pharmacies. They don't know yet. But it won't allow for smoking. So it'll be vaping, stuff like that only. Germany, of course, everyone's watching Germany, but the law there, it's probably going to pass this week, maybe next week, but it's going to be like a quasi-legalization model, not really the open market that the government said they would implement when they were first elected. But it's still just like in the US, although it's not going to be it's not like legalization, but it's still the biggest, most consequential cannabis legal reform in that country in decades, if not ever. So it's meaningful from that perspective. Germany will allow cannabis clubs where you can join there, and these are going to be non-profit clubs, of course. No mass cultivation, which may be a good thing. A lot of smart people are calling this quasi-legalization, which I kind of agree with. Although the biggest development is that Germany is decriminalizing, which, and from a social justice perspective, is maybe more important than a commercial market, anyways, right? Because the fact is, you don't want people going to jail for these minor cannabis offenses, which is what's happening in most countries right now. Phase 2 or the second pillar of that German plan is going to allow for regional pilot projects, regional pilot projects that will allow for retail. But, I don't know if they're going to finish that before the next election in Germany. I kind of doubt it, but who knows, right? Thailand is another super interesting country just because of the sheer volume of dollars you're talking about in terms of sales. But it's an example of how cannabis decriminalization can kind of go sideways if governments lose control, or if they don't have a good plan right off the bat, because their country kind of lost control of the industry immediately after it was decriminalized. And it's not the kind of market where there's opportunities for international businesses, because an unknown percentage of the sales are illegal still because they're adult use. And when Thailand decriminalized, they never intended to create a recreational market. It was always supposed to be for the economy, but it was supposed to be focused around medical. but they failed to implement the required regulatory mechanisms to control the sales. So that's why things got out of control there. So they're going to be releasing a new law. Well, they already have the draft law out for consultation, and they're going to be looking to pass that soon. Israel's super interesting. It's probably the second or third biggest federally regulated medical market in the world. They produce their own, but they also import a lot. And some local companies are upset about Canadian imports, and that's how the anti-dumping investigation got started. Because previous to this, you weren't really talking about significant dollars going back and forth, but now you have $170 million total exports. I don't know what percentage that went to Israel, maybe a third, maybe a quarter, but still, that's not an irrelevant sum of money. So that's why people, it's worthwhile to get lawyers involved now, because you're talking about tens of millions of dollars. So I think, like, it doesn't matter what that investigation concludes necessarily. The fact is if Israel wants to penalize Canadian exporters because Canada doesn't allow commercial imports, then Israel can just do it regardless of whatever their investigation finds. Canadian companies might want to, prepare for that eventuality. There's tons of countries I'm watching too. You got Mexico, they're constantly finding new ways to fail to regulate cannabis. And then you have Australia, which is a great market and growing fast. Australia, Germany, and Israel, probably the three biggest medical markets in the world outside of Canada.
Can you, a question from the listeners again, isn't the exclusion of flower a massive limitation to the Spanish consultation and its potential medical cannabis programs? Can you comment on that?
Sure. I mean, of course it's a meaningful exclusion, because that would be a big, anywhere where medical cannabis is allowed in all of its forms, flower is usually the biggest form factor, but there are a lot of markets that don't allow flower. So I think in North America, that's really bizarre for us, but outside of North America, it's not that unusual. New Zealand also doesn't allow flower, and you're probably going to see that happen in a lot of places. So people just have to get used to it.
Kind of like a stepping stone to more regulation developments and stuff like that.
Well, I think you can legalize medical cannabis without having flower. I don't think it's required.
Maybe Stephen, another question from the audience here: Are Germany and Malta not following Thailand as an example of decriminalization without regulation? Canada learned the hard way about this early on. Any thoughts?
Yeah, to Matt's point, there is an obvious, with the benefits of decriminalization in terms of individual liberty and freedom, that's obviously very significant. But the reality is, who's going to be supporting that market and who's going to benefit from that market? Like, you go to a trade show or a conference or anything like that associated with Germany, and there's all these sizable extraction machines or prepackaged rolling machines or equipment that no medical cannabis company would ever touch or go near or have the demand for. Yet this equipment is selling, and it is being it is being utilized. So there's quite a sizable market being developed where nor the consumer is not going to be protected, nor is the government going to be protected, because there is a wave of illicit products that will flood the market with lack of without fear of any consequence because of this level of decriminalization. It's similar to what happened a bit in New York. In New York, it happened overnight with all the bodegas opening and product from California suddenly appearing. You're going to get something very similar happening in Germany. There is already a phenomenal amount of digital companies and tech companies building their pipeline of users within that market. And I think that's the real shame. That's the real shame, that all this effort and energy is going to be created to fuel something that is fundamentally illicit and grey, and does not protect the consumer. This is the challenge. Like we have really good trials happening, say in Switzerland. Like Switzerland is an exciting model. Like there is legal recreational adult use cannabis sales happening in Europe. It is happening. Each of the cantons in Switzerland are starting to sell. Small numbers, but they are starting to sell. In Netherlands, they're finally getting there. Now it's taken them a while, but no, as I said, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I'm not overly optimistic about Germany for cannabis, for professionally run cannabis companies with investors and boards. I think those who are standalone operators and willing to be a little bit more maneuverable and flexible in their approach to the market can certainly benefit. But if you are a publicly listed company trying to benefit from the change in regulation or pending change in regulation in Germany, I'd be very skeptical about their claims and their aspirations, because the legislation is not supportive of that. And I also see that political capital is waning, or will wane, once it is actually introduced, and how they tackle that will take even longer. I think the fact that they missed having a thoughtful, meaningful, and brave approach to legalization, have been stuck in the middle, which they're going to be in limbo with for some time. Now, of course, there is a wider implication of that, because they have decriminalized, they are in the EU zone. There is, how does this product pass from border to border in a decriminalized manner? So it is going to drag in all bordering countries. Well, it's going to drag in the whole union, of course, but it is going to accelerate how that conversation takes place. That is
Excellent.
That is, I would say, a positive, but
it's good news for sure.
It's going to be a rushed response, unfortunately, to contain rather than demonstrate innovation and proactiveness.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's could be a positive to get them all on board and to move the ball faster. So before we shift to another kind of topic, a question again from the audience, and really appreciate all the questions coming in. I'd like to throw this one to David. So we talked a little bit about the imports into Canada and how there is, some talks around that, and why should Canadian companies worry about imports from Israel or from other countries? Because imports are limited to medical, and the Canadian medical industry is declining very rapidly. Like, why shouldn't we open the doors to import if it's going to just hit that small market? Any thoughts, David?
I think that's an interesting question. I think one thing that struck me while some of the other panelists were discussing that is prices are so low in Canada that even if the door was opened wide to non-medical import, I don't think it would be that much of a factor. Certainly not anytime soon. Like I say, we're sitting on 1 million kilograms, a little bit more of our own supply here. I just don't think there would be a huge market demand. Now, there are other reasons why Canada has not allowed for non-medical import that have to do with international treaties, and frankly, the fact that a lot of other countries at the time didn't have non-medical access anyway, so it wasn't really seen as a huge priority. I think there was also some protectionist sentiment, but at this point, I don't think it's protectionism that's driving the continuation of that rule. With Canada, I think it has more to do with sensitivity to international law. And in fact, not only, on paper, imports are limited to medical or research, but if you look at the actual numbers of what has come in, it's all been for research.
Yeah.
I think pre-legalization, there was a small amount that came through for medical use when a patient was able to prove that there was something specific in the US market that they couldn't get access to in Canada. In general, all of the parameters are going to be pretty strict. I do think that's an interesting subject, and I imagine some of the thought leaders will dive into that in the coming months. Is, what would that look like to just open that wide open and allow Canada to start to? I think from a market perspective, it's not going to be a threat to licensed producers, because I don't think foreign producers could undercut Canada. Certainly not yet.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you for that. So, just to shift a little bit into less regulation and more into some product and some marketing and some general availabilities. So, David, again, now that we see a very mature industry on the rec side, and we're seeing new but also more and more similar products on the shelf, what is hot? What's a hot product right now, formulation or whatnot, and what should people stay away? Do you know of any oversupply of certain SKUs? So what should producers focus on?
Yeah, great question, Nico. I would say the biggest thing for a new grower, anytime I talk to people entering the market, stay away from 3.5s. 28 grams are also pretty oversaturated. In terms of dried flower, 7 gram and 14 gram SKUs. And increasingly, we're starting to see some producers doing, 20 bags, where it's just, a 2 gram bag. So unique ways to stand out on shelves. If you're just selling flower, 3.5 and 28 gram is really, really difficult to compete unless you're coming in at bargain basement prices. One other sort of asterisk to that point is that it's one thing to stand out on shelves once you already have a recognized brand name. New producers entering the market, not only are they competing with a saturated market, but they have essentially little to no name recognition. So coming in at a 7 gram or a 14 gram at a low price is probably the only way a lot of these newer guys are going to succeed in that space. If you enter in at 3.5 at $35, $40 MSRP, you're going to get, you're not going to sell, you're going to get RTB'd in most of these provinces. So I think that continues to be the trend. We're seeing growth in 14 and 7 gram offerings because of that. Outside of dried flower, obviously, or somewhat connected to dried flower, I suppose, is obviously a huge continued growth in extracts, especially infused pre-rolls. That's starting to really eat into the market share of dried flower in general. Incredibly popular, and seems to be a way for a lot of producers to make a little bit more on that product. Frankly, it's a way to repurpose flower that might not otherwise get that high of a price, kind of slather it in some extracts and some terpenes, and consumers suddenly love it. I have heard from some retailers that some of the products that were popular about a year ago, like Shred, that were really exploding about a year ago, and not specifically just Shred, but the milled product that consumers were really liking, it seems like maybe consumers got their fill and are kind of pulling away from that and moving more towards infused pre-rolls and things like that. So I think that's something to watch. One other big one to watch is obviously ingested extracts. Health Canada obviously pushed against those. Industry pulled back a little bit. Organigram made a big splash and had Jolts return to the market. Since then, I've seen several other new products that, from my perspective, are similarly non-compliant approach, pushing those boundaries out there. And we haven't heard any pushback from Health Canada yet. We will continue to see that sector grow, I think. I haven't seen the sales numbers over the last 6 months or so, but when those products were really moving last year, they were a big mover in all the provinces they were selling in. So I imagine that the numbers, when we get them, will reflect that as well. So we're going to continue to watch that. That's I advise people to not really jump into that space. Obviously, Health Canada has been very clear from their perspective that it's not compliant, and so a big company can take that on. I wouldn't risk it if I were a small company. You might end up sitting on a lot of unsold product somewhere along the line. But it's an interesting evolution, and it's interesting to see. And I like to go out and buy those products whenever I see them. And there's some intriguing, unique approaches out there. We are also seeing growth in edibles, slowly, but it's continuing to build. I think a big part of that is probably beverages. And topicals, although still a really small market share, is continuing to increase as well. So there's some interesting trends there for those companies that are focusing on that. And I think we'll start to see more product innovation, as well as, I think initially there was a whole array of topical products out there that didn't succeed, but the handful of companies that have been able to figure it out seem like they're really emerging. And I guess the last one is resins and rosins and other concentrates like that are really starting to get their foothold. Prices are obviously finally coming down. We have a lot of it's being fed by some outdoor growers. We have some people really stepping up in terms of the type of product they're putting out there. So I that market continues to grow as well, and I think that's a big reason why. And I think we'll continue to see that too, consumer, and that's pulling in, frankly, I think a lot of new consumers from the legacy market to the legal market once they're starting to see really high quality resin or rosin at affordable prices that compete with what they can get online in the illicit market. So all of those I think we'll continue to watch. I think dried flower will continue to dominate, but its market share will continue to get eaten into by all those other things as they start to become a little bit more competitive.
So very good. Thank you for that excellent breakdown. Besides talking to you directly, where do people get that kind of information or some guidance like that? Because I've heard of people that get no feedback from provinces, depends on the province and things like that, and you have to really do your own work to find out what kind of product, and not everybody has the means to do so. So what do you recommend people where to get this information?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that can often be the benefit of ensuring you have, if you're a standalone cultivator, especially, or if you're a cultivator who needs a processor to get into the provincial markets. I think having a good processor can fill in those gaps for you. Ideally, that's what they're doing for you. They understand that whole landscape really well. I spoke with a nursery a couple months ago that really impressed me, because they were talking about how they take that approach when they're engaging with growers, because they're paying attention to those market trends long term, so they're not flooding the market with the new cultivar. So ensuring that throughout the supply chain you're partnering with people who do have the time and the capacity to be looking at those big picture issues, so that you can focus on what you do, which is growing. Probably the easiest thing, because you're not going to just be able to call up the province and say, hey, what should I grow for you guys? That's not their place to say, nor do they have the time or the capacity to do that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So Stephen, I'm going to throw that similar question to you about product differentiation at retail, but more obviously on the international side. Outside of North America, because we kind of know what's happening on the rec side in the US and in Canada. What's currently trending, and more important, what are the regulatory limitations abroad that kind of prohibit some of these? And I'm sure there are lots.
Yeah,
lots, and keep it short.
What's trending is what you can get your hands on. Like, there isn't, I think we unfortunately don't have that same options or choice or selection that exists in Canada. You're probably at cannabis 3.0 at this stage, where still is cannabis 0.01, in terms of if you want to contrast where the two markets are at. Now, things are obviously developing as the supply chain matures a little bit more. So it's a combination of two or three things. First, it's like, okay, what does the regulations allow? So is it magistral, or can you get flour, or can you get oils and finished product? Who can actually import and who can distribute in those markets. So how closed off are those markets? So in Italy, for instance, there's 3 different products on the market, and the majority of it is magistrel. It's really, really limited in terms of the strains available and product variety available. Whereas Germany, there's hundreds of products now. The UK, there's 350 registered products now available. And it'll come. The patients are getting a little bit more aware of it, and you're also finding the quasi patient as well, of those who are particularly interested in their strains and particularly interested in the choice out there. But it's the education around the cannabis patient, and certainly the cannabis doctor, is still very limited. Like a doctor having to prescribe a sour diesel, or it's completely, it doesn't correspond with any of their training. It doesn't correspond with any of their kind of their motivation to get a patient better. So there is a constant shift here in terms of how products, certainly in Europe, are being labeled and how they're being described, because obviously there's a growing base of patients who are getting more knowledgeable about what's good for them, and they're going to their doctor and they're telling them, prescribe me this and that and so on, because in some markets it's very specific in terms of what's written on the prescription is what you get. But there's also a wider base of doctors who are trying to understand the difference behind the product type. So flour still remains the product in all markets, but there is a shift. Like as oils and vapes become more readily available, certainly, again, like we're talking primarily medical, there is obviously a significant market here for other products, but where they come from and how you categorize it is certainly questionable. But you have a growing kind of demand from health institutions to be able to demonstrate kind of measurable intake and control, and and to be able for them to understand and not register, but certainly monitor dosage. So flour isn't always the best for that, which is kind of why they're looking at devices to assist. So there's certainly a rise in devices, and you can see you're seeing large scale pharma companies acquire device IP and tech IP related to dosage on cannabis more and more. I think that just demonstrates where markets are pure medical first, and where it where it runs in alignment with the existing pharma route. You're this mix of rec patient and medical patients. The division is happening more and more. So unfortunately we don't have, like, look, there's nothing better than going to Toronto, or going to California, or any of those markets, and ending up on outside the airport on my return, like consuming far too much before I get on the plane because I can't take it with me. Like you definitely get, we're the consumer here isn't that established. Now and of course there's also marketing restrictions. There's marketing restrictions in terms of what you can
we see that in Canada as well, right?
Of course. So but there is there's a lot of independent patient and advocate websites and review sites and social media accounts who are doing a great job of providing that independent, non-biased, review of the market. But if I'm a distributor, or if I'm a manufacturer, cultivator, and I'm trying to launch a product in the market, getting it into the hands of either doctors or patients still remains quite a challenge, and you're very reliant on the distributor, who is
Hmm.
who in a lot of cases are very new to this, and maybe not have the resources to provide that push. So for a
Yeah.
lot of getting market access is one thing, and market entry, but actually market exposure, market growth is something entirely different in those
Yeah,
markets.
exactly. Well, thank you. So, in short, flour is still big demand, but new flour and new availabilities, and depending on where the secondary products are manufactured, there is a demand, but that is climbing, maybe not as fast as some
Yeah, and
producers
there's
would
still
like
like
it. Yes.
exactly like there's still like an irradiated flour and non-irradiated. Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
big question marks over the quality of where the flour comes from. The debate amongst certain Canadian producers over other Canadian producers. Like there is very lively conversations within the patient forums on it. So there is
No,
there
that's
is
good.
a big community who are you know you wouldn't want to be precious if you're a producer and reading some of the comments, like, but they
Hmm.
there's no holds barred. But it is a really there is a very active community who are kind of pushing for better quality product, which is
So
which
yeah,
is which is
yeah, and
great.
you mentioned now twice that you've mentioned that's like it's a lot of part on education and just communication. Just to move on a little bit, just to have one last round. Matt, what do you think are the challenges Canadian businesses face on the international market? We talked about product, we talked
Um,
about regulations and all that. Yeah. So what do you
that's a good
think?
question. That's a good question. One of the challenges is that there's too many Canadian businesses that want to be international cannabis businesses, probably, right? Because the international medical market is quite small. The entire medical market outside North America is probably under $1 billion. So too many Canadian businesses want to be exporters is probably the first problem. Because there aren't enough import markets. Really, you're looking at Israel, Australia, Germany, and Brazil. Basically, those are the only import markets. Australia and Israel want to be net exporters, so you can cross those off your list in terms of long-term opportunities. Um, too many countries are legalizing medical cannabis primarily with an eye on the export market. You see this all the time. Denmark, Portugal, Jamaica, Colombia, a host of African countries um, want to create commercial opportunities for their domestic exporters, but really they should be focused on creating commercial opportunities within their own borders first, and then after those companies develop, then create opportunities for them to export. Failure is
Yeah.
inevitable for those places. In those places, so Canadian exporters are up against a massive wall of competition within Canada and outside of Canada to access relatively small markets.
Really interesting, and I like what you said about a lot of countries are getting into the game for the export business. Uh, an example of that, South Africa have no domestic market at all, but they are 100% looking at export, right? So those types of countries will not help the overall international supply chain, right? That's a very
Failure is
good point.
inevitable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Portugal is another big one. Everybody got to Portugal a couple of years ago. They were all going to grow so much weed out of Portugal, and look where we are today. A lot of
They're still
companies have
growing it,
pulled
but
out.
where's it
So
going?
yeah, exactly. David, from a Canadian perspective. Oh, sorry, Stephen.
So like Portugal it's progressive. It's super progressive in its positioning around cannabis and what it's looking to do. Like in Portugal, the legislation there, in the recent legislation, is looking to get cannabis, to be available where beer and wine is available. So if you go into the supermarket, you can purchase it, and can purchase it like beer and wine. So they are super progressive about it. There's obviously there's limitations and things take time. In terms of where the product is going out of Portugal, yeah, there's a big question about it. But
And
from
there's very little domestic market.
Well, there's
Right.
little domestic market, yeah, of course. Like there's one facility in Portugal that grows enough cannabis for the whole of Europe for the next 5 years. So there's already oversupply in Europe, and nobody wants to talk about it. There's already a huge amount of product going out the back door from facilities. Nobody wants to talk about it, which I think is going to unfortunately set the industry back. But anyway, like we've when we covered things, so like one of our one of our main events, Cannabis Europa, that takes place in London in June, is look, we bring it's about where certainly European regulators come to talk about one the pain points they have, but then learn from each other in terms of where the access points are regarding opening up reform. So Portugal has had a very progressive drug reform policy overall, but the stumbling blocks when it comes to the commercialization of it. There is hundreds of thousands of free hotel rooms in Portugal that they still have not recovered from since COVID, and they're continuously looking at ways in which to rejuvenate this. And there's credible demand. Now there is going to be a significant, there's going to be another big announcement. Unfortunately, I can't say, but something quite significant happening next week.
Maybe we'll leave it at that, Stephen.
Yeah,
we'll leave it at that
because
we're running out of time.
Can you tell us which country, Stephen?
I can't.
A few minutes.
I can't. It's nice and warm, but I'll leave it. It's nice and warm around water.
I'd like to throw the one question to David before we finish off. And David, we only have a couple of minutes here. From a Canadian perspective, what are some of the risks and challenges that some producers are looking to face in 2024?
Yeah, Nico, briefly, I think it builds on some of my previous answers. We're still seeing a lot of supply, kind of far exceeding demand. So I think 2024 and beyond will continue to be pretty difficult for a lot of producers. I think we will continue to see an increase in licenses being revoked by the license holder as companies kind of throw in the towel. I think that having pathways to market will continue to be one of the biggest challenges for producers. Getting licensed has always been the easy part. It's, having a good product at an affordable price that you can actually get into shelves and then convince consumers to buy. That will continue to be the biggest challenge. So, anyone entering this space, I always tell them to ensure they've got about a 3-year runway in terms of covering their operating costs. I think that is even more true now. So I think enter cautiously, operate cautiously. There is opportunity, and I do talk to a lot of successful license holders as well. They've figured out, what lane is theirs, and they stay in it quite well. Don't try to be everything to everyone, and have that long-term vision. It's so much more than just having good weed and telling people you have the best weed. It's about seeing a lot of these issues, looking down the road 6 months, a year, 2 years, understanding payment schedules. And understanding the reality of the market and all these points I highlighted earlier in terms of where the saturation points are and where the opportunities for sort of novel SKUs are. So, I don't think there's a lot of blue sky in the immediate future. And I think that companies that will survive are the companies that recognize that and plan accordingly.
Wow. Thank you, David, for that. That summarizes very well for us Canadians to finish our conversation here. We do have quite a few more questions that we don't have time for. I just want to highlight a couple. Some reports of oversupply grew from 1.3 billion to 1.4 in 2021 to 2022. I think David already mentioned that oversupply is stabilizing now. We're not expecting to see much growth. And then there's a big loaded question that I think this is a whole other conversation. And I did have a question for David on that. How do you think Canadian LPs can overcome the stigma of overstating C of A's? And do you think there should be a standard set? that is a loaded question. This is the THC race, and there's the OCS also getting involved now. We'll keep that for another conversation. But I want to thank a big thank you to all three panelists, Matt, Stephen, and David, for all your insight. Very, very appreciate that. Really opened their eyes to what is happening on the international market. I hope that a lot of people got some good information on this. And that is it for us. So thank you once again to CANNA and the whole AV team behind us. And have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Nico.
Thank you.